archives were not supposed to exist. Hidden beneath the city library, behind a rusted iron door few dared to touch, lay the Forgotten Wing. Dust clung to every surface, shadows stretched unnaturally long, and the air carried the heavy scent of time itself. For decades, no one had spoken of Elias Thorne, the last curator assigned to this labyrinth of shelves. Some whispered he had simply vanished. Others swore he had gone mad, swallowed whole by the very collection he guarded. When Clara entered the archives for the first time, she expected quiet study halls and stacks of forgotten manuscripts. Instead, she was greeted by an unsettling stillness. Every step echoed too loudly. Every corner seemed to hide something just out of sight. She was only an intern, a recent graduate eager to prove herself, tasked with cataloging what little remained of the collection. But curiosity had teeth. Beneath a loose floorboard in the curator's office, she found it. A weathered leather-bound journal with Elias Thorne's name etched faintly on the cover. Its pages were yellowed, ink smudged by frantic hands. The first entry chilled her. The archives whisper when the lamps go dim. They are not voices I know, but they know me. I fear I am not alone here. That night, as Clara worked beneath the flickering glow of a failing lamp, she heard it too, a faint murmur, like someone speaking just beyond the shelves. She froze, straining to listen. The words were indecipherable, but the tone carried intent, warning, or perhaps invitation. Her heart raced. She told herself it was air moving through the vents. But when she turned back to her desk, the journal was open to a page she had not yet read. Do not follow the whispers, it said in jagged script. Befollowing days blurred. Lights dimmed whenever she approached certain aisles. Shadows seemed to crawl along the ceiling. And always the whispers followed, sometimes soft and coaxing, sometimes urgent, as though demanding to be heard. Clara tried to dismiss it, tried to focus on her work, but each time she touched the journal, she felt as if someone were guiding her hand, leading her deeper into Elias Thorne's descent. The final entry she read that night was scrawled with desperation. If you are reading this, you are already marked. The curse does not wait. It feeds. Leave while you still can, or the shelves will remember you as they remembered me. The lamp hissed, and the room plunged into darkness. Clara could not resist returning to the journal. Each page seemed to beckon, as though Elias Thorne's voice had seeped into the ink itself. She read by candlelight, the lamp above her desk now useless, its bulb shattered in silence the night before. Knowledge was never meant to be buried, Elias had written. But these archives are not keepers of history. They are its predators. They devour the ones who linger too long. As Clara continued, Elias's entries shifted from scholarly notes to frantic confessions. He described nights when the shelves rearranged themselves, hallways stretching longer than they should, doors leading to rooms that had never existed before. "The labyrinth is alive," one entry declared. "It twists for those it chooses. I am chosen. I cannot leave." The more Clara read, the more the words resonated with her. She remembered her own unease, the flickering lights, the whispers. Could Elias's madness have been truth disguised as delusion? She discovered references to volumes she had not seen in the archive's records, titles written in languages she did not recognize, always accompanied by Elias's warnings. One passage stood out. The Codex Mortis lies in the deepest chamber, bound in iron, wrapped in ash. It should never be read aloud. It is not a book. It is a hunger. Clara closed the journal, her fingers trembling. She told herself it was nonsense, the fevered writings of a man consumed by isolation. And yet, why did she feel watched every time her eyes drifted toward the locked wing of the archives? That night, Clara awoke at her desk to the sound of pages fluttering. Every book on the table lay still, except the journal, which now rested open, though she had closed it hours earlier. The words on the page had changed. "Do you hear them now?" The whisper came not from the room, but from inside her head. Clara clutched her temples as the sound swelled, voices overlapping, chanting in a tongue both alien and horribly familiar. She stumbled back, knocking the lamp to the ground. It's broken glass, scattering across the stone floor. When the noise stopped, Clara realized she had been standing before a section of shelves she had never noticed before. A narrow gap yawned open between them, like an invitation. Heart pounding, she stepped closer. The gap led to a narrow corridor, lit by no source she could see, yet dimly illuminated all the same. The air inside was colder, heavier. She felt as if she were trespassing on something ancient, something that resented her presence. On the wall, scrawled in soot or blood, were words that matched Elias's handwriting. Once inside, the labyrinth knows your name. Clara fled the passage, slamming the shelves closed with trembling hands. But the damage was done. She could no longer convince herself this was imagination. Elias Thorne had walked these same halls, followed the same whispers, and surrendered himself to their call. The journal had one final line at the end of its section, written with a shaking hand. The curse does not begin with the Codex. It begins with me. Clara dropped the book as if it had burned her. Clara could not bring herself to leave the archives, though every instinct screamed for escape. The journal had become a chain around her neck. Terrifying, yes, but impossible to abandon. She found herself returning again and again to Elias Thorne's trembling words, as if his descent into madness might somehow guide her own survival. One line haunted her most of all. The curse does not begin with the Codex. It begins with me. What did Elias mean? Had he unleashed something before ever touching those forbidden texts? Or was he confessing to being chosen long before the book found him? The questions burned inside her, and so she searched through drawers, filing cabinets, forgotten ledgers of names and dates, until she stumbled upon a brittle folder marked with a single word: guardianship. Inside were letters, contracts, and journals, stretching back more than a century. The Thorne family name appeared over and over again. One document, dated 1889, bore the signature of Elias's grandfather, Jonathan Thorne, keeper of the forgotten archives. Another page, older still, was a family tree, but many names had been crossed out with thick black ink. Next to several of them in the margins, someone had written one word: lost. It dawned on Clara that Elias had not been the first curator to vanish. His bloodline had been tied to this place for generations. Every Thorne who served here met a grim fate: disappearance, madness, or worse. The archives were not merely a job for them. They were a curse passed down like inheritance. She read with growing dread. 1897. Jonathan Thorne vanished during a storm. Body never found. 1921. Rebecca Thorne last seen entering the lower vaults. Doors discovered sealed from the inside. 1954. Samuel Thorne left a note claiming the shelves have begun to move again. Never returned home. 1986. Miriam Thorne found incoherent, repeating the same word until her death. Codex, Codex. And finally, 2002. Elias Thorne presumed missing. Investigation closed. Each entry confirmed the same fate. The archives consumed their keepers, one after another. Keeper within folder lay sketches Elias himself had drawn. One showed a heavy, iron-bound book, its cover marked by strange glyphs and a jagged symbol that hurt Clara's eyes when she looked at it too long. Another depicted a locked chamber circled in red ink with the words, "Beneath the third sublevel, sealed for a reason. The Codex Mortis." Clara shuddered, remembering the line from the journal. "It is not a book, it is a hunger." The folder slipped from her hands, scattering papers across the floor. She scrambled to collect them, but froze when she realized one sheet was not written in Elias's hand at all. It was older, its ink faded, its words written in a more elegant style. The Codex was never meant to be read by men. It belongs to the shadows between. To open it is to invite them in. The lamp above her flickered violently. The air shifted, colder than before, heavy with the scent of ash. The shelves groaned as though stretching awake, their wood cracking in protest. Clara's breath caught. She whispered aloud, "Who are you? What do you want from me?" And for the first time, the whispers answered clearly, "Keeper." The voice was many voices, layered, rising and falling like waves in the dark. Her knees weakened. It knew her. It had chosen her. Clara fled the office, clutching the journal to her chest. She ran through the aisles, the shelves towering like walls of a labyrinth that grew taller with each step. In her panic, she stumbled into a reading room she hadn't noticed before. Dust covered the tables, but one chair was pulled out as though someone had been sitting there moments ago. On the table lay another journal, older, its leather nearly rotted away. Its first page bore a name, Rebecca Thorne. Her hands shook as she flipped through its fragile pages. Rebecca's handwriting was elegant but rushed, deteriorating as the entries progressed. The curse is bound not to a book, but to blood. We are not keepers. We are sacrifices. The archives feed on us, binding us to their shelves. I fear Elias will learn this too late, as I have. Clara's heart pounded. Elias's words, Rebecca's warnings, the countless names crossed out in the family tree. Everything pointed to one horrifying truth. The archives themselves were alive, and the Thorne family had been their chosen prey for over a century. A cold draft swept the room. The candles on the table extinguished in unison, leaving only the pale light of the moon through a cracked window. Clara turned, and there at the far end of the room, a shadow detached itself from the wall. It was tall, impossibly thin, with eyes that glowed faintly like dying embers. It did not move, but she felt its intent, heavy and suffocating. The whispers surged again, this time filling the room, pressing into her skull until she nearly screamed. "Keeper, join us." Clara staggered back, clutching the journals. She didn't know if her trembling legs carried her out of the room, or if the archives shifted again to push her forward. All she knew was that the shadow lingered, watching, patient. When she finally collapsed against the curator's desk, gasping for breath, the journal slid open to a page she hadn't seen before. Elias's words stared back at her. "I tried to end it. I tried to seal the Codex, but the curse is older than the book. It is older than the shelves themselves. The archives do not guard history. They hunger for it, and they will never be full." The ink bled across the page as though wet, smearing beneath her fingertips. For the first time, Clara realized the curse wasn't simply tied to Elias, or the Codex, or the Thorne family. It was the archives themselves, an ancient labyrinth of hunger and memory, waiting to consume its next sacrifice. And now, they had her name. Clara could no longer ignore the pull. The archives themselves seemed to guide her, shifting subtly as she moved through the labyrinthine aisles. Corridors that had been blocked now opened. Stairways she had never seen appeared before her. Her trembling steps carried her downward, toward the lowest levels where Elias's sketches had marked the sealed chamber. Each floor below was colder, the silence heavier. At times, she thought she heard her own footsteps echoing back, not delayed, but synchronized, as though something walked beside her, mirroring her every movement in the dark. At last, she found a rusted gate, half buried in shadows. On its corroded surface, Elias had carved a single desperate phrase: "Do not open. I could not hold it." The gate groaned as Clara forced it open, revealing a stone stairwell spiraling down into a vault that smelled of dust, metal, and something older, something rotting but not dead. At the center of the chamber stood a pedestal, and upon it lay the Codex Mortis, bound in cracked leather and sealed with iron clasps that pulsed faintly, as though alive. Around the pedestal, symbols had been scorched into the floor. Wards of protection, broken and fading with age. Her hands trembled. But she did not approach. Instead, she saw something slumped in the corner. A man's shape, withered, skeletal. His clothes were tattered, but one detail was unmistakable: the archivist's crest embroidered on the lapel. Elias Thorne. Clara's breath hitched as she stepped closer. His head lolled to the side, his eye sockets empty, his mouth frozen in a silent scream. Yet even as she stared, his chest shifted. Not a breath, something else. A faint, writhing motion beneath his ribcage, as if his hollow body was still occupied by something unnatural. Her stomach turned. She stumbled back, knocking against the pedestal. At her touch, the Codex's clasps rattled violently. Suddenly, Elias's voice filled the chamber, Not from his lips, but from everywhere at once. I tried to stop it. I failed. It does not kill. It keeps. It keeps us all. Clara pressed her hands against her ears, but the voice was inside her mind, echoing through her skull. Elias's words tumbled out, fragments of his final torment. I thought I could seal it, but I am the seal. They made me part of it, and now it waits for you. The Codex pulsed again, and a page inside fluttered open on its own. Clara dared to glance at it, and what she saw nearly tore her sanity apart. The parchment was blank, except for a single name scrawled in black ink that seemed to bleed as she watched. Clara Bennett. Her knees buckled. She hadn't touched the book, hadn't read from it, yet it already knew her name. It had already written her into its endless catalog of keepers. Whispers filled the chamber. Dozens, hundreds, a chorus of voices, layered together. She recognized them now. Not just Elias, but all the Thorns before him. Jonathan, Rebecca, Samuel, Miriam, all cried out from within the Codex, bound as echoes, their identities devoured by the archive's hunger. You will join us. You are already written. The air grew thick, oppressive, pressing down like water, filling a drowning lung. The shelves in the chamber's walls began to tremble, books shaking free of their places and spilling across the floor. Their pages opened, but none contained words, only faces. Pale screaming faces, etched into the parchment like photographs burned into flesh. Clara screamed and stumbled back. The faces turned, shifting toward her, mouths opening and closing soundlessly. They were the past curators, trapped forever, consumed not just in body but in essence. The realization struck like a blade. The curse did not kill. It consumed, rewrote, and bound souls into the archives. That was the truth Elias had discovered too late. The voices rose into a deafening cacophony, urging her closer to the Codex. Her vision blurred, and for a moment, she felt herself leaning forward, compelled to place her hands on its cover, to surrender. She could almost see it, her own face etched into a page, her voice forever added to the endless chorus. But something inside her rebelled. With all her strength, she tore herself away, clutching Elias's journal like a lifeline. If his words had led her here, maybe they could also lead her out. She staggered toward the stairwell, but as she moved, the Codex's clasps snapped open one by one. The book groaned, the air around it bending, as if reality itself resisted its hunger. You cannot run, Elias's voice whispered, softer now, almost pitying. You are already part of the archives. Whether you choose to stay or flee, it will claim you. Clara bolted up the stairs, heart pounding. The gate slammed behind her with a force that rattled her teeth, as though the archives themselves were closing the door. But even as she ran, she could feel it, an invisible weight pressing against her chest, the faint hum of whispers following her into every corridor. She no longer belonged to the world outside. Something had marked her. Back in the Curator's office, Clara collapsed into the chair, her mind spiraling. She now understood the cycle. The archives demanded a keeper, not to preserve history, but to feed upon it. Elias had tried to contain the curse by becoming part of it, but in doing so, he had only ensured its survival. Now, she faced the same choice: to expose the archives and risk unleashing the curse beyond its walls, or to surrender, to become the next sacrifice. Keeping the hunger contained a little longer. Tears blurred her vision as she flipped through Elias's journal one last time. His final entry read, If you are reading this, then you are already chosen. I pray you will do better than I did. But know this, there is no escape. There is only the cost. The lamp flickered once more. Clara raised her head, heart in her throat. The office door was ajar, though she had locked it. And beyond the threshold, deep within the aisles, she saw a shadow move. It wasn't Elias. It wasn't any of the Thorns. It was waiting for her. The whispers came again, no longer pleading, but promising. Soon. Clara didn't sleep. She couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes, the whispers grew louder. Threads of voices weaving into her dreams until they became indistinguishable from her own thoughts. By dawn, the archives had changed. The air was no longer still, but carried a faint vibration, like the resonant hum of something vast awakening. Dust motes hung in unnatural suspension, as though the building itself had exhaled and was waiting to inhale again. Clara moved cautiously between the shelves. Books lay scattered on the floor, as if thrown from the cases by invisible hands. Some were open, pages twitching slightly, like breaths drawn through paper lungs. And then she saw it. The portraits. Once static oil paintings of former curators, now shifted imperceptibly, their eyes following her with unnatural precision. She whispered under her breath, "It's spreading." Back in the office, Clara toned to Elias's journal, flipping frantically through the pages for something, anything that might resemble instructions. Her eyes caught on a section she hadn't noticed before. Ink smudged and frantic. Elias had written, "The Codex cannot be destroyed. Fire fails. Blades fail. It consumes what opposes it. The only way to halt its spread is to bind it again, to feed it a soul willing to endure eternity." Clara's blood ran cold. Elias hadn't simply failed. He had offered himself to contain it. That was why his body was still down there, half alive, half consumed. "I am the seal," his echo had confessed. Now, the same burden shifted toward her. The whispers escalated into murmurs, then into voices audible even without concentration. Clara heard her own name spoken from every corner, every shadow. "Clara! Clara! Join us! We wait for you!" She ran, panic tightening her chest, but every corridor stretched longer than it should, shelving units multiplying and closing in around her. Books toppled to block her path, their covers snapping open as ghostly hands clawed out of the pages, trying to grasp her wrists. A scream tore from her throat as she pulled free, stumbling into the main hall. The portraits of the Thorns now stared openly, their faces twisted in torment, mouths open in silent, endless screams. And yet their painted eyes begged her, "End this!" Clara realized she couldn't leave. The curse was no longer confined to the lower vault. It had seeped upward, infecting every corridor, every wall, every object within the archives. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. Hands trembling, she pulled it out, only to see the screen flicker to life without her touching it. A message appeared in bold letters across the display. "You are the next curator." The phone froze, then shattered in her hands, shards scattering across the floor. She sprinted toward the main entrance. The iron doors loomed ahead, sunlight streaming faintly through their cracks. Freedom was just a few feet away, but as she reached them, the air thickened, like running into invisible tar. Her limbs grew heavy, her breath shallow. The doors groaned, and a chorus of voices rose. "Stay, seal it with yourself." Desperation fueled her. With every ounce of strength, she pushed against the doors. They shifted open just enough for light to spill inside. For a moment, just a moment, she thought she might make it. But then she saw it. Her reflection in the glass panel wasn't her own. Pale skin, hollow eyes, lips whispering words she hadn't spoken. "You can't leave." She staggered back, horrified, and the door slammed shut, sealing her inside once more. The archives trembled violently. Shells toppled, scattering centuries of knowledge across the ground. The Codex Mortis's power surged from the lower chamber, no longer bound by stone or seal. Clara felt it before she saw it, a pulse of energy that rattled the marrow in her bones. Down the central aisle, shadows congealed into a shape. Not human, but something that wore humanity as a mask. Dozens of faces flickered across its form, whispering in overlapping voices. And in its hands, the codex floated, its clasps broken, its pages open wide. Her name still bled across its parchment, glowing like a wound that would never close. The entity spoke through the mouths of many. Join us, or the world joins us. Clara fell to her knees, tears streaming. She understood now. If she fled, if she found a way out, the Codex would follow. Its hunger would spread beyond these walls, devouring not just curators, but anyone it touched. But if she stayed, she would be consumed, bound like Elias, her soul trapped, her identity dissolved into the endless archive, a prison of whispers, forever. Her hands shook as she clutched Elias's journal. His words echoed. There is no escape. There is only the cost. Clara screamed in defiance, voice breaking the silence. I won't let it take anyone else! The codex pulsed as if in answer, its pages fluttering violently. Rising to her feet, Clara walked toward the entity, every step like walking into fire. The faces writhed across its surface, some pleading, others grinning with malice. Elias's visage appeared for a moment, his eyes hollow, yet mournful. She pressed the journal against her chest, closing her eyes. Take me. Bind it with me. But it ends here. The codex shuddered. Pages burst free, swirling around her like a cyclone. Each one bore her name, written again and again. The ink searing into her skin like brands. Her scream echoed as the entity reached forward, shadows wrapping around her body. The faces swallowed her, her consciousness tearing away from flesh, pulled into the endless void of the archive. And then, silence. The codex's pages closed, its clasps snapping shut once more. The entity dissolved into shadows, retreating back into the lower vault. The archives stilled. Books settled. The portraits returned to their motionless state. On the office desk, Elias's journal flipped to its final page. The ink bled, shifting, rewriting itself into a single new entry. The Curator, Clara Bennett. The lamp flickered, steadied, and the building sighed as though satisfied. Yet in the stillness, if one listened closely, whispers lingered. They did not sound like Elias anymore. They sounded like Clara. I will keep it, but for how long? The archive stood in silence. Weeks bled into months, the building cloaked in abandonment once more. No one dared return after Clara Bennett vanished. The local council sealed the place, declaring it unsafe. But rumors spread quickly, whispers of screams in the night, of lights flickering behind boarded windows. Dust reclaimed the halls. Shelves sagged with forgotten weight. The portraits stared blankly once more, their agony hidden beneath oil and varnish. To any outsider, it looked like a relic of history, forgotten and harmless. But the whispers never stopped. If one pressed their ear to the door on a quiet night, they might hear a soft, sorrowful voice, sometimes pleading, sometimes warning, sometimes laughing. Always Clara. One autumn evening, nearly a year later, a young historian named Daniel Crow arrived in town. He specialized in hidden histories, places of myth and legend. Naturally, the archives became his obsession. Locals warned him away. "That building's cursed," they said. "It takes people. Don't go digging where the dead don't rest." But Daniel was stubborn, skeptical. To him, curses were just exaggerated folklore, stories told to cover up uncomfortable truths. On his third night in town, he found himself at the gate of the archives, flashlight in hand. The lock on the iron doors looked rusted, brittle. A quick strike with a hammer, and the chains fell loose. As the doors creaked open, the building exhaled. The air inside was cold, unnaturally so. Daniel's breath fogged as he swept the light across the shelves. Dust coated everything, yet faint footprints marked the floor, leading deeper into the halls. They weren't fresh, but neither were they as old as the dust suggested. The beam of his flashlight passed over the portraits. For a moment, he thought the eyes glistened. A trick of the light, surely. But then one painting caught him. A young woman, her gaze both fierce and sorrowful. The brass plaque beneath read, "Clara Bennett, Curator." Daniel frowned. Strange, I didn't read about her in any records. On a desk in the office, untouched for months, sat a familiar leather-bound book. The journal. Daniel opened it. To his surprise, the pages were no longer decayed and brittle, but crisp, as though freshly written. He skimmed through entries of madness, curses, warnings. The handwriting shifted styles across the pages, sometimes sharp and elegant, sometimes shaky, sometimes frantic. The last page stopped him cold. Daniel Crow has entered the archives. His hands trembled. He hadn't written that. Nobody had. And yet the ink glistened wet, as though just placed there. He dropped the book. The silence broke. At first only a faint sigh, then a chorus of hushed voices slithering through the aisles. "Daniel. Daniel? We've been waiting." His flashlight flickered, struggling against the dark. He backed toward the door, heart pounding, but the air thickened, heavy, with the same suffocating presence that had once trapped Clara. And then he heard her. Distinct, clear, "Leave, before it takes you too." Her voice wasn't cruel or malicious. It was desperate. A warning from within the prison she had chosen. Daniel froze. He wanted to believe it was just his imagination, the product of late nights and too many ghost stories. But the journal still lay on the desk, its pages turning by themselves, each line filled in with fresh ink. The new curator must choose: stay or unleash. The doors behind him slammed shut. His flashlight died, plunging the room into darkness. only the whispers remained. And then, the echo of Clara's voice, softer now, like it came from deep within the shelves. Run if you can, but remember, the archives never let go. The screen would fade to black here,